Hey everyone, this is RazorLeaf on TreueNarukami, or my name is Brandon, and this is the OverGrowth Arboros Dragon Sephiroth Neo Nectar deck. This deck profile is going to be broken into 3 parts. First part, quick and dirty deck list, what I run, how many of each. So those of you interested in just the deck list, skip on ahead. I think all information I'm going to put at the bottom for how to skip to the proper section, so if you just want deck list, go ahead. Part 2, how to win. It's not in what are your strategies, your goals, your starting hands, what are you going to have for the first 5 cards. So if you want to know how to play this deck, if you're new or just interested in how this deck works and how the general playstyle is, go there. Third part is going to be how to counter / what are the weaknesses of this deck, and my overall thoughts of what I find this deck for new players, or just what is it as a deck in general. So go ahead if you want to interested, skip on to that. If you want the whole thing, just relax and continue watching. So just a brief intro. This deck is a attrition brute force style deck where you're going to hit high numbers consistently over and over again. You're sort of like a wrecking ball, or like you have like a brick in your hand, and you're just going to continually whack your opponents all over and over again with this brick. You know, it's not like a nuke where you blow them up instantly, but you know, you're going to hit hard, and you're just going to continually hit them over and over again with that wrecking ball, with that brick, and eventually they're going to crumble into pieces. Like if you hit a wall with a wrecking ball, it's eventually going to crumble, right? So, you know, you're going to hit it over and over again, and eventually you just cannot guard anymore, and the resources are just entirely depleted, and you're just going to, out of sheer force, you're going to win. They're going to run out of steam, basically. So, yeah, continue watching, and hope you enjoy. Everyone. So this is going to be the quick deck list number of what I run, how many I run, and of course, small comments if I find that I need to add it here because it doesn't really fit anywhere else. But anyways, starting off, Ride Chain, therefore you need the Ride Chain Grade 0 starter. Arboros Dragon, Ratoon, no questions asked, you gotta have this guy. Typical effect, right on top of him, search top 7, and you can get your Grade 2, Grade 3. Speaking of which, Grade 1 is going to have 4 Arboros Dragon Branch. Run 4 because you want the highest probability to get him in your hand and start it when you begin the game, and you need this guy. So 4 of him. Next up are 4 Caramel Popcorns and 4 Corolla Dragons. These guys are going to be your superior calling targets when you get your Ride Chain. If you don't know what that means, continue watching to the strategies part and you'll learn what all that is about. For those of you who are just looking at this deck and wanting to know how many of each or what I'm running and all the effects, 4 of each. And in layman's terms, you want 4 of the vanilla boosters and 4 of the 7k Counterblast 1 plus 1k boosters. And of course, the last card for your Grade 1 lineup is the Maiden of Blossom Rain. She is the Neo Nectar Perfect Guard. Run 4 of her because the meta right now is break rides and huge numbers that kill you in a final turn style. So these cards would be great because they just take out all that pain and having to guard them. Guard those horrible vanguards during that time. So we want 4 of that. Grade 2 lineup, Arboros Dragon Timber, Grade 2 version of the Ride Chain. 4 of him because, of course, you want to get him as most often as you can. And you would also run 3 Glass Beats Dragons and 3 Maiden of Rainbow Wood. 3 of each because you want to have the highest probability and the most consistent way of getting 2 of the same copies on the field, whether it be 2 of her or 2 of him. You'll find out why if it's important to have multiple rear guards of the exact same name, but in the end though, 3 of each. Counterblast 2, draw a card. Don't know why Neo Nectar has 2, but they do, and I'm not going to complain about that. Grade 3 lineup, 3 Maiden of the Trailing Rose. Amazing backup Vanguard. Look up her effect, you don't know what she does. She's an 11k beat stick, and she's a great backup Vanguard if Sephiroth Ride Chain does not work out. And 4 of your main boss card, Arboros Dragon Sephiroth. 4 of him because, well, you want him as your main Vanguard, therefore run as many as possible, right? Last but not least, your trigger lineup. 4 heals, standard. Heals help you in many ways more than just simply getting a trigger. So very good to have. 4 of these. You're going to want to have 8 crits, a mix between the Chestnut Bullet and the Night Musketeer Daniel. Mac Daddy triggers for any offensive base type trigger. They are amazing to have, and Neo Nectar sadly only has 2, so run 8 of them for sure. Now for the last 4 triggers, it's completely up to you. If Neo Nectar had another critical trigger, I may actually run 4 crit. As of right now, I'm really liking the offensive style, having just 4 stands. More offensive based, you get more attacks, and since you plus so much with the deck, which I'll explain later on, it's okay to have 4 stands. But if you hate stand triggers, because, well, people have their opinions, right? And I'm not going to judge you. So if you want to have 4 draws, that's also completely fine as well. I've run 4 draws before. Sometimes I feel like stands is just too offensive based. I want something more balanced. Draws are the way to go, and drawing a card, you know, generally is always a good thing in this game. So 4 draw triggers. And that's it for the deck list. If you want to find out how to play this deck, continue watching. If you just want the deck list, well, I hope that you find this video useful. Alright, so for starting hand, in Vanguard, you're given the benefits of Mulligan, so you can get rid of cards you don't like, redraw, and get a better hand. So for your new players, or if you players that just want to know how to start off this deck, I'll tell you what the first 5 cards you're going to want to have in your hand. Ride Chain, so definitely the grade 1 unit. This will kickstart the entire Ride Chain and all the benefits you get for having to risk a Ride Chain style of play. So you must have him. He's priority number 1. He's super important because he's the only unit of the Ride Chain that cannot be searched out. The grade 2 and grade 3 can be searched out or drive checked or drawn during your draw phase. This guy cannot be. When you ride him on grade 0, you check top 7 and you search for either this guy or this guy. This guy, you can't get any way of searching it other than your starting hand, so you have to have him. Accompanying him, which is different from most ride chains, is that you also need to have an accompanying booster in order to get this guy's ride chain to be effective. You need a Coral Dragon or a Caramel Popcorn ideally. These guys will be great targets to Superior Call from your deck. I'll explain that later on in the strategy section. And of course the grade 2 or grade 3, because having them in your hand is a lot more safe and is a lot more consistent, and if you ride this and you fish out another one, you just plus another one. No big deal. And of course the 5th card, leave it up to you. Can be anything it wants to be. Just avoid a trigger. I mean, you can never have the perfect ideal hand, so, you know, this card I leave it up very lenient. Grade 2, perfect card, another booster, whatever you want, just avoid a trigger is generally what I say to most players. So in terms of priority, number 1, this is must. 2nd priority, and then 3rd, don't worry about this one as much, the 5th card. Alright? Alright, so moving on to style of play. So the ride chain for Arboros is that every time you get the correct ride chain on top, you basically target one rear guard and Superior Call another rear guard from your deck with the exact same name. So, of course, your strategy throughout the ride phase before you hit Limit Break and your winning image, you're going to ride grade 1 on grade 0, and you have to call a booster. You must call a booster. I'll explain why. Because when you go into the next phase to ride grade 2 on grade 1, the grade 1's effect is that when you have the proper ride chain, the grade 2 on the grade 1, target a rear guard, Superior Call from your deck. So another Corolla Dragon, or maybe just a rear guard, just target it, and then Superior Call an identical name. So when you ride the grade 3 and grade 2, same thing, target one, and pull in the field. It can even be anything you all like. It doesn't have to be a grade 1 booster. It can be any kind of rear guard. So if you have this, you can target Trailing Rose, copy another one from your deck. It's all about getting a plus from your deck. However, for consistency reasons, try to get a back row booster, because most decks don't have this wonderful ability to have perfect booster lineups in the back row. So these guys will be consistent numbers and generally are very dependable on how much power they'll give you during your attacking phase. So try to do that. And when you reach Limit Break or a late game during your winning image, basically you want your Arboros, Sephiroth, Vanguard, consistent boosters, and 2 identical rear guards. The reason why it's important to have all these multiple copies of the same name, which I've been hinting at all along, is because Arboros Dragon's Limit Break is that at 4 damage, all Neo Nectars, so rear guards and himself, get the ability where if there's another card in the field with the same name, this card gets +3. The +3s don't stack, but this basically means if he's on the field, and there's another guy with the same name on the field, he gets +3. So these guys are now 11k boosters. Your rear guards get +3. So you're going to hit for high, consistent, brute force numbers, and your general aim to win the game obviously is not going to be a final turn sort of idea, but basically it's going to be consecutive rounds just hitting your opponent over and over again until they just cannot guard anymore and they're just out of resources because they're guarding against like 23s, 24s, 25s, and they're not just your vanguards, your rear guards as well. So generally you want 2 made in the trailing rows. This will be the most powerful rear guard, hitting 25 each. If you have Sephiroths, you're hitting 24s, but because Sephiroth's the same name as these guys, your vanguard will be hitting for 25. So if you have this, you have a more powerful vanguard. And of course, the most annoying one I find, the one I love the most, is having 2 of the Counterblast 2 draw cards, because these guys only hit, I believe, 23s, but when they do hit, regardless of whatever they hit, you can draw cards. And since Sephiroth doesn't use Counterblast, feel free to just use up your Counterblast for drawing cards, and it adds so much pressure to your opponent, and your opponent just cannot stand letting him hit sometimes. Yeah, and that's generally your aiming goal. This is what you want to see. So overall, I'm going to talk about now the weaknesses, or if you're against this deck, how to counter it. Same idea, sort of, right? What you're aiming for to cripple this deck. What this deck lacks is the fact that Arboros cannot function without a field. If he doesn't have boosters or identical cards on the field of the same names, his limit break doesn't work. So if you had something that looked like that, like this, even if at 4 damage, nothing's gonna get that +3 bonus power. So you want to have something where at least your boosters are the same, so even if your rear guards aren't the same, these guys are the same. So your field's going to be very important to set up. If you miss your ride chain, you obviously cannot set up the field at all. You're not going to get a great field like this, so you've already sort of been crippled right at the get-go if you don't get your ride chain. And of course, your rear guards are now just as important as your vanguard, meaning that if you have clones of rear guards on the field, and you want to make sure that you hit your opponent for high good numbers next turn, you have to be able to make sure that you're willing to guard these guys, because your opponent will want to attack this. If you're against an Arboros deck, crash the rear guards, because they're what makes the deck extremely scary, in the fact that that's what makes these columns so hurtful. So if you're against an Arboros deck, break the rear guards. If you're an Arboros player, guard your rear guards, because if you lose these rear guards and you lose your attack force, and let's say you drew draw triggers or you drew something that would not be played on the field, you're now just going to have a fancy back row, but you're not going to have a very good attacking row. And the whole point of this deck is, like I said earlier, is to attack consistent brute force numbers with 3 columns. Most decks can just function with just 2 columns and having a devastating vanguard, but Arboros needs a field in order to be a very good vanguard. So yeah. That's generally how the playstyle of the deck is. In terms of my overall thoughts, Arboros, it was my first deck that I got into Vanguard with, so I highly recommend it to new players. It's fairly simple. Just get the ride chain, target good boosters. Once you have your field, swing, drive check, attack, drive check. Very simple. There's no other teching involved besides just getting that. So for new players, I highly recommend this. If you have friends that just want to start Vanguard, don't know where to pick Arboros, because it's simple, hits good numbers, and it's a very good deck to win with. And for you players that just want a new deck to play with, I would advertise Arboros if you're into having really nice fields and just hitting really high consistent numbers. Like, you're not really into not devastatingly big numbers, but let's say you're really into just hitting good numbers every single turn, go with Arboros. It's definitely an attrition-based deck. You're just going to hit your opponent over and over and over again until they just can't guard anymore. And the numbers you hit are just absolutely horrible against 11k and 10k Vanguards. You're hitting like 23s, 24s, 25s. Your Vanguard's going to hit 21s, 25s. You know, your opponent is just going to be like, holy crap, I'm guarding 15/20s to just min guard, or 15/20s against your rear guards. So overall, great deck. The weaknesses, of course, is your field setup. So against Kagero, Narukami, retiring units, you might have a little trouble, but I mean, it is Vanguard, so you know, there'll still be a way to win in the end, and you know, it's not an absolute loss all the time. So, alright, this is RazorLeaf, and I hope you enjoyed the deck profile and analysis.